Welcome to Beyond the Accent. Let's get started. Welcome back to Beyond the Accent. Today we're diving into a topic real close to my heart, that is making peace with your accent. Now, if you've ever wondered when or if you should change your accent or what makes your speech uniquely you, this episode is for you. We're going to explore what an accent really is, how it differs from pronunciation, and even what makes up your personal idiolect. Yes, that's a real word, and you're gonna love what it means. But first, let me ask you this. When you think about your accent, how does it make you feel? Does it elicit positive feelings, or does it make you self-conscious? Whatever your answer, I'm sure most bilinguals have thought of it before, and we're going to unpack it together today. What is an accent anyway? Let's start with the basics. Like, what is it? In simple terms, it's how your speech reflects your linguistic and cultural background. And your accent is kind of like a linguistic fingerprint. It's unique to you and shaped by your experiences, geography, and even the languages that you grew up hearing. But here's the thing, having an accent is not a problem that needs solving. In fact, every single person on Earth has one. Every native speaker of every language out there has an accent. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Accent is not the same as pronunciation. If anything, pronunciation is one of the many elements to an accent. In essence, pronunciation is about saying individual sounds correctly. Rather, it's how we pronounce each syllable of a word, which can be accurate or not. So, for instance, pronouncing dawn for down is wrong. It'll be misunderstood. Now, an accent is the language's rhythm and melody, distinguishing regional variations of the same language, and pronunciation. And there's so much to it. So, for instance, let's say you're French and you're taking Mandarin classes. It's very likely that when you speak Mandarin, you speak it with a French accent, because the way you make the sounds and tones in Mandarin is affected by your French mouth. And by French mouth, I mean that for, say, the first 20 years of your life, your mouth muscles were mostly producing French sounds and tones. Some will call this original setup of yours default placement, where the language lives and resonates inside your mouth, or posture. Tongue posture to be exact. And it'll be way more relaxed for Americans, for instance, than it is for Brits, within one and the same language. Now, if I were to define the second language accent, could be third, fourth, whatever it is, it's basically application of phonological rules, sounds, and intonation of one language onto another. And this is where I would like to once again state, everyone has an accent, a signature voice they produce a certain language in. There are no people with no accents, and there are no bad accents. Fundamentally, there's either more clarity or less clarity, more connection or less connection. Now, your idiolect, your personal speech style, right? For a fun linguistic term, idiolect, let me say this. It's a fancy word for your personal way of speaking in principle. Your unique cocktail of accent, pronunciation, word choice, and even the phrases that you use on a daily. Think of your idiolect as your speech signature. So it's a lot of things. It's why no two people sound exactly alike. Even if they grew up in the same place, lived around the same people, or learned the same language, which is pretty cool, right? Your idiolect will always keep you you. And as far as I'm concerned, that's decidedly a good thing. To give you an example, it doesn't even have to be related to phonetics. What is it that you tend to do more of as a speaker? Like, what are your habits when it comes to how you formulate a sentence? Are you more of an active voice user or a passive voice user? So, I ate the chips versus, hey, the chips got eaten. Well, you normally put an adverbial clause before or after the main clause. The chips were eaten while you were out. While you were out, the chips were eaten. I mean, these are not the same. And this is where I'd also like to mention translation and things getting lost or changed in translation, because every translator of a book will also have an idiolect, as will the writer whose work they're translating. So, for instance, Haruki Murakami, one of my favorite writers, has got these two translators interpreting his work, J. Rubin and Alfred Birnbaum. And here's two English-speaking versions of one and the same piece from Murakami's wind-up bird chronicle. Listen up. When the phone rang, I was in the kitchen. boiling a pot full of spaghetti and whistling along with an FM broadcast of the overture of Rossini's The Thieving Magpie, which has to be the perfect music for cooking pasta. And the second one, I'm in the kitchen cooking spaghetti when the woman calls. Another moment until the spaghetti is done. There I am, whistling the prelude to Rossini's La Gazza Ladra along with the FM radio. Perfect spaghetti cooking music. What do you guys make of the differences there? The first is somehow neater and cleaner, if you will. Well, according to a lot of experts, it is. And I do agree. As far as the second version, by Alfred Birnbaum, it's almost neurotic. It's much more staccato. Tick, tick, tick. And it appears that countless fans are just infatuated with Birnbaum's quirky style. And that's Murakami's voice to them. It's not J. Rubin's. Although J. Rubin was the first officially sanctioned translator. It's just the same with speech. Phonetically, lexically, syntactically, our voices are not the same. And I personally just love that. Love that for me, love that for you. Now, when might you want to change your accent? Let's talk about the when and why. There are many practical reasons to adjust your accent. Maybe you're in a new country and want to avoid repeating yourself, or maybe your job requires clear communication with an international audience or an American audience or a British audience, what have you. But here's a key distinction. Adjusting your accent does not mean erasing it, okay? Erasing yourself along with it. What you're aiming for is confidence. Clarity, I'm going to say that word a lot. And connection, of course. Connection with yourself and those listening. That's different, and there's different ways to look for those things. For instance, on a speech sound level, I want you to focus on your vowels primarily. And as you do, allow space for variety, for difference, because yes, voices are unique, and one American accent will be nothing like another American accent. Here's a clip from the Lincoln Lawyer Show of my favorite character, Mickey Holler, talking in one of my favorite American accents, one featuring some Latino elements, Latinx elements. We're talking a legitimate LA accent variety, one of the bazillion US accents that follows the pronunciation patterns and intonational patterns of American English, of which, yes, as I've been saying, there's a ton of varieties, of course. So let us give it a listen.
Never heard of me because I make it a practice not to be heard of. Celebrity lawyers bring too much attention to their clients. I'll go right to the punchline then. Jerry Vincent was an excellent attorney. I'm better.
What do you mean?
Oh, mija, 2 failed marriages, busted law practice, 6 months in rehab.
You hit the jackpot with your daughter. I mean, come on.
You know, when I look back, I always wanted to be a defense lawyer. Ever since I was a kid. The stuff they teach you in law school. How the system's supposed to work. You get out there and it's all just muddy. Everybody's working an angle. Everybody lies. For a while, you started wondering if you're doing any good at all.
Do you guys love it as much as I love it? Now, here's the flip side. You do not have to change your accent if you don't want to. Your accent tells your story, and it's completely up to you as to which bits of the story you cover and how exactly you're going to go about it. Take a moment to think about the accents that you do admire. Maybe it's a French or Russian-speaking physics professor. Here's a couple lines from the marvelous Dr. Tatiana Yerokimova from the Texas A&M University.
You insert a tip of the knife into a large, heavy potato. Look, it's barely holding it. Now, if I take a mallet and I hit the handle like this, what will happen? Will the potato drop? Let's check. Love it. Look, the blade went deeper and deeper through the potato because the potato is inertial. It didn't have time to move.
Or it could be your favorite character on the show. Sofia Vergara's Colombian accent got her a giant fan base, after all.
I know that I have an accent, but people understand me just fine. Do you say in English?
Helicopter.
Yes, yes, yes. You try speaking in another language.
And this isn't the first time someone's accent's proven to be an asset. You don't need to look far for another such success story, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the characters that made him into a huge star. I'm just going to let Arnold talk for himself in this one.
Funny thing is, all of the stuff that they said, the Hollywood producers and the directors and all these geniuses, they were saying that this is an obstacle for me to become a leading man, became an asset. Then when they did Terminator, Jim Cameron said what made Terminator work and why it became successful was because Schwarzenegger talks like a machine.
I mean, he's right, isn't he? And dude went on to be governor of California. A lot of it is in our minds, right? What works and what doesn't. Gotta be open-minded about how we're gonna go about our own signature voices. Now we're almost out of time, so I want us to get real practical. If you're looking to improve clarity while generously creating space for all of yourself, for various parts of your authenticity, here are a few tips. There's going to be 3 exactly. The first one, focus on rhythm and stress. That is the first one for good reason, okay? These are the heartbeat of English. Mastering them can make a huge difference in terms of being understood and in terms of feeling it. Get into the swing of things, get into the groove. I mean, why could Shakespeare never really work in French? Because rhythm. I'm going to quote Tom Scott here. It's a lengthy quote as well. Shakespeare's plays and poetry have a certain rhythm and feeling to them. A French-speaking poet could not have written something that sounds like Shakespeare, because the language you speak affects the poetry and verse that it's possible for you to write in. English has what's called lexical stress, contest versus contest. Stress syllables are part of speech and poetic writing in English, and if you put the stress on the wrong syllable, it sounds ridiculous, right? English also has prosodic stress, which is the difference between I want that, and I want that. But right now, we're talking about the lexical stress that's built into the words that we use. In English poetry, meter and timing really matter, and you have to be very careful with it. Now, in French, by default, stress lands on the last syllable of an utterance. If you experiment, you'll find you sound much more French when you emphasize only the last syllable. And so why does Shakespeare sound like Shakespeare then? Because iambic and pentameter, meaning you stress every other syllable in pairs with 5 such pairs in every line you write. If you want to sound like Shakespeare, this is how. If music be the food of love, play on. So Shakespeare wrote in rhythm mostly. And it's something to think about. Okay, Shakespeare's at the center, at the heart of how English works. Shakespeare is definitely someone to come back to for more insights of this nature. Don't give up on yourself like I did some years ago. Shakespeare is not easy to tackle because of the language that's being used, even though so much of it did end up in the modern version of it. Our second tip, tune into intonation. Think of it as the music of your sentences. It helps listeners better follow your meaning and make better sense of the pragmatics of what you're saying. That is, why you're saying what you're saying. So for instance, are you asking for help? Would you mind holding this for me? Da 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 da. Are you being friendly? Oh, we're so glad you made it after all. Ba 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 ba. Are you asking for space? I'm afraid I can't make lunch. There's just too much to do. Da 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 da. Are you feeling awkward? And you also want to communicate that, not with words, but the body language and the intonational patterns that you're relying on. So what do you do? So it's also something that Chandler Bing of Friends would probably have done. It's kind of shifting the stress and with all of your voice, all of its music conveying the awkwardness and making it be humorous. So intonation helps you navigate all of that and effectively convey whatever's on your mind and do so with so much more precision. That's the most important thing. Tip 3, embrace connected speech. Where the magic of fluent, flowy English happens, right? It's how the natives link their words together in natural, flowing ways. For example, instead of saying every word separately, and that's something that a lot of people tend to do because they want to be better understood, so they do separate the words, and the opposite of being understood happens. So instead of did you eat, right, you go, just blend it into do you eat? And there's many ways to practice it. Of course, it's best to have someone teach all that stuff. I might be the person to do that, but there's ways to listen for it, right? So I want you to start with common phrases, and I want you to listen closely whenever you're watching a show, you're listening to someone talk to you. How are those bits being linked in natural conversation? Which bits are neighboring each other, and how do things get mixed in? I want you to try mimicking sentences like, what do you want? What do you want? What are you? What are you? What are you? What do you want? What do you want? It almost sounds aggressive if you don't blend the elements that are sitting right next to each other. Or, of course, turn your going tos into gonnas, right? Gonna call you later. Gonna call you later, as opposed to I'm going to call you later. Don't worry about perfecting it right away. Of course, right? Just notice the flow. Noticing is what it starts with. And try it out in your speech. Experiment. Embracing these very natural connections, it can make you sound so much more fluent, so much freer, help you feel more at ease in conversations. So yes, all of these are game changers for clarity, and I want you to rely on them. That's it for today, friends. Whether you choose to embrace your accent, soften it, or just learn more about it, remember, your voice is yours. And it's probably pretty great. You can do whatever you want with it. If this episode resonated with you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Send me a message or DM me on Instagram. I always love connecting with you. And if you're enjoying the podcast, don't forget to leave a review or share it with someone who might need it. So I'll see you next week. Until then, keep finding joy in how you communicate. Talk to you soon. Thank you for joining me on Beyond the Accent, Speak Without Limits with Carrie. I hope you're feeling inspired, informed, and ready to use your voice with more confidence. Talk soon.